Ela é economista, secretária da Fazenda do Estado de Goiás, ex-diretora do Itaú e ex-economista-chefe da Tendência. Ana Carla, por favor. A dela está aí? Tá.
Em primeiro lugar, queria agradecer aqui a Marisa, Tomás, Cláudio, Marco, Sérgio, pelo convite. É sempre um prazer estar aqui no Insper. E aí aproveito para já cumprimentar os times aqui do Insper, do Porquê, da BEI e da Arq.Futuro. Should I speak in English for the presentation? Yes? Okay. I'm much more fluent in Portuguese than in English, but it's okay. I prefer that. Well, first of all, I thought I'm today a manager of a state, not a city. And I thought, well, how can I make things work? How can I bring something to motivate the panel that is going to follow us in a minute? And then I started to read the book, Edward Glaser's book, and I saw one part of his preface for the Brazilian edition, and I think that it can motivate the debate and make some of the links that I want to make here when talking about sharing my experience as a manager of a state. And then I'm going to read it in Portuguese because it's written in Portuguese and I didn't want to translate it. Well, eu deveria ter escrito mais um capítulo sobre a dificuldade de governar uma cidade. O economista parte do princípio de que, uma vez conhecidas, as políticas certas serão implantadas. Isso não faz sentido. Os políticos quase sempre são mais fortes do que as políticas. Mas mesmo quando os líderes são corajosos e sábios e querem fazer a coisa certa, a cidade pode impedi-los. Os trabalhadores podem não cooperar. O líder pode não ser capaz de impelir seus cidadãos. Bons líderes urbanos, frequentemente, se parecem mais com boxeadores que com professores. E talvez isso reflita a constante luta que é lidar com a burocracia de uma cidade. Well, that's quite the challenge that we have when we manage a city or a state, especially during the major fiscal crisis that we've been facing for the last years, and especially for the last 18 months. And when I think about the similarities about managing a city and managing a state, I would say that in the space of a fiscal crisis, in the space of the fiscal management, for sure they are pretty alike in the sense that the challenges are more or less the same. In Brazil now we face not only a very, very important economic crisis, very profound economic crisis, but it's a fiscal crisis. And all the subnationals, and it's a central government crisis for sure, but all the subnationals, they face crises in the fiscal space which are even tougher than the central government crisis. And if I'm nowadays in a state that is now surrendering, now starting to have a more equilibrium, a more balanced situation, for sure the cities are living in a world, are facing a situation which is much more tougher than what we face in the States. We normally say that in Brazil we have the central government crisis, but it goes down even more profoundly when you go to the states and then you go to the cities, especially because the cities, they are very dependent from the states. So every time that I'm in Goiás and I receive a mayor, the first thing that he says is, well, Secretaria, my situation is even worse than yours. And he's right, he's correct, because that's the situation, that's the reality. I'm going to go through the economic environment. Of course, I think maybe it's more for Ed than for the Brazilians. We know what we are facing, we've been living, and we've been going through during the last 18 months. But I think it's important just to set the scene. That's what we've been living, and that's what the country, the states, and the cities have been facing. Then I go through my experience in Goiás, and at the end we can talk a little bit about the central government bailout that we just got to in the last week. Well, the economic environment, that's what we've been facing. Brazil entered a recession, a big recession, especially it started maybe 2 or 3 years ago, more pronouncedly 2 years ago, but 2015 was a year that we, for sure, we won't regret. The blue line is GDP growth. The yellow line is Goiás GDP growth. Goiás is a state which is it's a very particular economy, so we suffered a little bit less than Brazil suffered, but even though we suffered a lot during the last year. And the red line is inflation rate. So that's the economic scene. We had recession, we had inflation, and that for a fiscal situation, it's a big challenge everywhere, but specifically in Brazil. On the other hand, we have unemployment rates that went up, and turning to levels that we had already forgotten that they existed. And also that is a very important challenge for cities, for states, for countries, because I normally say that we have a dual labor market in Brazil. We have a labor market which is free, which is the private one. We have a labor market that is linked to the public sector, where stability, all the jobs are protected. So you can anyway, even though it's a bad chart, it's a bad situation, when you are in a private company, you can adjust by firing people, by trying to put things in another level. In the public sector, you can't do it in Brazil. You have to keep your employees, even if they don't work at all. And it happens sometimes. Well, so we started last year with a central government under financial stress, and with the states in a financial stress, the subnationals as a whole, in a financial crisis as well. We had cash flow problems, we had imbalances. When we talk about 170 billion deficit for the central government this year in 2016, you can see how huge is the problem, but the central government, he can issue money, he can issue bonds. The states in Brazil, they can't, and the cities, they can't as well. So the finance structure in the states, in the subnationals, are much more strict, are more, the framework you have, they are much more narrow than in the central government. We had huge deficits as well. We have lower tax revenues, lower central government transfers because of the crisis, because of the economic recession, and rigidities of the budget that everybody in Brazil knows that it's something that characterizes our budget, and that makes things much more difficult to be settled. And there's one thing that is different from the US, for instance, which is that the subnationals, they can't file for bankruptcy. In some places, you just can say, well, I'm broken, and let's see how things go. From now, we are going to pay our debts in the way that we can, but in Brazil, we can't do it. That's why we had to have a resolution plan, or at least we had to go to the central government and say, well, you have to help me because we are going to be broken, and that's not good for the country. Actually, something which is important is that we have 27 states, actually 26 plus the federal district. And every one of the 27 states, entities, had problems, fiscal problems. Even São Paulo, which is a much more robust and much more balanced state, had problems with the recession and the lack of revenues. And the point is that once you have all the entities, and once again, the cities were even worse than that. the cities. In Goiás, we have 246 cities, and they are all in trouble, all in fiscal problems. And it's very difficult to think about a recovery of the economy, of the country's economy, without having the recovery of the bases, of the cities, of the states. Because a state like Goiás or Mato Grosso do Sul, the region of where Goiás is, it's a very robust economy. It's if you compare Goiás with Brazil during the last 10 years, we grew more than 160% higher. The growth rate was 106% higher than it was in Brazil. So it's a very particular region with a strong economic situation, even though the fiscal problem put us in trouble and put all the economy under stress. And when you say, well, but if we have 27 states, 27 subnationals with problems of growth, with problems of recovery, how can you expect that the country will recover? And that's more or less the discussion that we had with the central government, and we, at the end, we got to a bailout plan that I will talk about later on. But let me talk about Goiás, and let me talk about why the point that Edward quoted in his preface is very important. When I got there, it was January last year, the situation that I got was, well, I have an imbalance of 6.7 billion reais, which is equivalent of 30% of my budget of 20 billion reais. And I said, well, the economy, let's see the budget again, let's see what's going to happen. The first thing that was clear was that the estimates for the revenues were, of course, overestimated because of the crisis. And I saw that we had at least 3 billion that wouldn't come. So I said, well, Governor, it's easy. We have to cut costs and we have to increase revenues. That's a very simple thing for an economist. If I have an imbalance, well, let's cut costs, let's increase revenues. But okay, we have a problem, we have a crisis. I can't. It's hard to increase revenues, so we have to cut costs. The point is that, well, the governor said, okay, be calm. Things are not so easy. Which costs do you want to cut? I said, well, first of all, personnel. We have to stop having risings in salaries in the public sector the way that we have. Okay, very good. We have laws that I passed. So it's hard. We have to think, no, you have to give me another plan because this one, it won't work. But we started to cut. It was not easy. We revised the budget, and then we were able to cut 2.8 billion reais, which is a lot, 15%, considering that we have many rigidities, and also because of the personnel increase that would stay in place because of the laws that were already passed. And then, what can I say? How can I share the big challenges that we had? First of all, corporativism. In Brazil, everything that we are going to do, the state is captured by the organized segments of the society that go against or want to protect their rights. And this stands for personnel, the people that work in the public sector, but also entrepreneurs. In Brazil, we have subsidies, we have a lot of benefits that many segments of the society are used to it and don't want to give them back. The second thing is political pressures. every time that I got something, that I took something to the governor with a plan for cutting a program, a public policy, I always heard, well, let me see, because maybe this segment of my supporters, they will say that we can't do it. So we have to see how I can manage not to upset my supporters or my a subset of supporters. So the political pressures are very, very strong. And of course, we have a legal institutional framework which make things much more harder than they should. And it's a discussion that we've been doing with the Congress, trying to flexibilize some laws, some parts of this framework. So even though the plan is very clear, what you have to do is very clear, it's not easy to cope with all those pressures, with all those challenges that make things difficult to happen. And when at the end of 2015, we got only 1 billion deficit, we cut more than 2.8, the 2.8 that we revised in the budget. We managed to cut 1 billion more. And now we have a surplus. Goiás is the second major surplus in Brazil. I can say that it was much more, not only because I have a governor who, in fact, is the one that manages the state, but he was able to go against these pressures, especially the political ones. He's a very experienced political. He's in his 4th mandate. But more than this, and I was talking to Marcos Lisboa before the event, and I told him, the problem is this, that the society has to be prepared, mature, to face those challenges. Because it's not only a question of having an economist that more or less has the ideas of what we should do, or the ideas of what should be correct to do. It's not only a question of having a good politician that will face the difficulties, but it's also a question of the society understanding and asking and going for the changes and the moves. And I'm sure that when I look back and see what the governor did in Goiás, I'm sure that he went up to where the society was demanding him. That's why he went against the political pressures and the corporativism, but only to the point where he understood that the society, the population, was supporting his actions. So instead of putting all the points, and that's the point of Edward's preface, affirmation, because that's the point that even though you have a good leadership, even though you have the correct answers and correct actions, you have to have the population, the society, going with you and supporting all the points that you have that you are trying to change. At the end, just talking about the central government bailout, because it's something that it's pretty much on the mood. Goiás did its fiscal adjustment. Other states did. Some cities did, but we are still in trouble in fiscal terms. And what we see is that many subnationals are in trouble, and the central government had to come and help subnationals, and they did it in 3 pillars. The first one, short-term relief. We are going to have our loans renegotiated in terms of term. We will have a grace period of 6 months that will help subnationals, and the bailout is only for states, not for cities. And we have short-term structural measures that will at least limit the path and the growth of our costs that are still in imbalance because of revenues that are not going up. And we have an agenda of long-term structural measures that, once again, will need to have the support of the society, of the population, to really be implemented, be approved and be implemented, because then we go against, once again, the corporativism. We go against a lot of interests and benefits that are very well organized, that have people and institutions that are very well organized, trying to keep them the way they are. So that's the point. That's the motivation for the panel that we are going to talk about, discuss now. And my idea was to share with you the challenges and what we did in Brazil, in Goiás. Thank you.